The fluorescent lights of a rural Alabama gas station flickered as cashier Linda Watkins wrinkled her nose. A customer had just walked in, a man with hollow eyes asking for directions to a camping area. But it wasn't his appearance that caught her attention. It was the overwhelming stench emanating from him. "I'll never forget that smell," she would later testify. When Officer Chad Barfield pulled over a black Cadillac Escalade for a routine traffic stop hours later, he noticed the same putrid odor. The driver, Timothy Jones Jr., claimed it was just garbage, but something about his nervous demeanor prompted the officer to search the vehicle. What authorities discovered would shock even the most hardened investigators. Evidence that would eventually reveal one of South Carolina's most devastating family tragedies.
With us, I'm J.R. Berry.
And I'm Darcy Strickland. We begin tonight in Lexington County as the sentencing phase of the Timothy Ray Jones Jr. trial continues.
His family members told the jury today they don't want him put to death for the murders of his 5 children. Here's Jacob Reynolds tonight.
The father of Timothy Jones Jr. testified for the second time on his son's behalf in the sentencing phase of the trial. Timothy Jones Sr. talked about the impact his grandchildren's death had on his life.
In August 2014, in a modest mobile home outside Columbia, South Carolina, 5 young children, Mara, Elias, Natan, Gabriel, and Abigail, vanished without a trace. Their father, a highly paid Intel engineer with a computer science degree, told conflicting stories about their whereabouts. Behind his composed exterior and $71,000 salary lay a man harboring dark impulses. A man who would later confess to methodically ending his children's lives, one by one, before driving their bodies across multiple states. But what transforms a father into someone capable of such actions? What invisible pressures build until they explode in violence against those most vulnerable? And how did a system designed to protect children fail so catastrophically? Tonight, we examine the case that left a community reeling and a mother forever shattered. We'll trace the warning signs that went unheeded, the missed opportunities for intervention, and the chilling details of that August night when 5 young lives were cut short by the very person meant to protect them. Have you ever wondered what could drive a parent to commit such an unthinkable act? Share your thoughts in the comments below as we delve into this haunting case that forces us to question everything we understand about family, mental health, and the human capacity for violence. Timothy Jones Jr. entered the world on December 28, 1981, in Chicago. Born to a 16-year-old mother ill-equipped for parenthood. His father, Timothy Jones Sr., would later describe Cindy Jones as violent and erratic, a woman likely suffering from undiagnosed mental illness that manifested in unpredictable outbursts. When Timothy was just 18 months old, Cindy abandoned the family, leaving a void that would shape his understanding of maternal love and trust. Timothy Sr. eventually remarried, attempting to create stability, but the foundation of abandonment had already been laid. By his late teens, Jones Jr. was spiraling. The year 2001 marked his first significant collision with the law, arrested in Illinois for cocaine possession, check forgery, and car theft. The courts handed down a 7-year sentence, though he would serve only 2 before release in 2003. Prison, however, didn't rehabilitate Jones. He spent his incarceration developing increasingly rigid religious interpretations that would later influence his views on family hierarchy and discipline. Upon release, Jones appeared determined to rewrite his story. He enrolled at Mississippi State University, displaying an aptitude for computer engineering. His dedication paid off in 2011 when he graduated with his degree, a remarkable achievement for a former inmate. This credential became his ticket to legitimacy, securing him a position at Intel with a $71,000 annual salary that placed him solidly in the middle class. He moved to South Carolina to work as an engineer, seemingly embracing a new chapter of stability and success. On paper, it looked like redemption, the classic American narrative of overcoming adversity through education and hard work. Jones had transformed from convict to computer engineer, from poverty to prosperity. But beneath this veneer of success, the psychological wounds of his childhood festered. The damaged son of abandonment remained. a psychological fault line waiting for the pressure that would eventually cause it to rupture, with devastating consequences for Mira, Elias, Natan, Gabriel, and Abigail, the 5 children who would later call him father. In the bustling streets of Chicago, Timothy Jones Jr. met Amber Kaiser, a chance encounter that would alter both their destinies. Friends described their early relationship as intense and fast-moving. By June 2004, barely months after meeting, they exchanged vows in DuPage County, Illinois, with Timothy presenting himself as a changed man ready for family life. Their first daughter, Mira, arrived soon after, bringing joy and new purpose to the young couple. Elias followed, then Natan, Gabrielle, and finally little Abigail. 5 children in rapid succession created a full household and mounting responsibility. They seemed like any other young family, a former neighbor recalled. The kids were always clean, always polite. You'd never guess what was happening behind closed doors. In 2011, with his newly minted computer engineering degree from Mississippi State University, Jones secured the position at Intel that would transform their financial situation. The family relocated to Lexington County, South Carolina, a suburb of Columbia. Settling into a mobile home that Jones insisted was temporary until they could afford something better. With his $71,000 annual salary, Jones became the family's sole provider. Amber stayed home with the children, an arrangement that Jones increasingly framed as biblical rather than practical. His interpretation of Christianity had evolved into something rigid and controlling. With clear hierarchies he expected to be followed without question. He believed women should be subservient, Amber would later testify. It wasn't a partnership, it was a dictatorship. Jones dictated everything from meal schedules to clothing choices. He monitored Amber's phone calls and friendships, gradually isolating her from support networks. The children learned early to anticipate his moods, adjusting their behavior accordingly. In May 2012, the facade cracked. Jones discovered Amber was having an affair with a 19-year-old neighbor, a desperate attempt at connection, she would later explain, after years of emotional isolation. The betrayal triggered something primal in Jones. He separated from Amber briefly but insisted on maintaining control of their children. During this period, Jones began seeing a family therapist. Those sessions focused not on his controlling behavior, but on his distrust stemming from childhood abandonment. He positioned himself as the victim, accusing Amber of neglecting their children, allegations serious enough to prompt an investigation by the Department of Social Services in 2011. Investigators found the home in disarray, but not enough evidence to remove the children. The case was closed, a critical missed opportunity that would have haunting consequences. By October 2013, their divorce was finalized with an unusual custody arrangement. Timothy received primary custody of all 5 children, while Amber was granted supervised visitation rights. Supervised by Timothy himself. Their meetings occurred primarily at a Chick-fil-A in Lexington, with Jones controlling even these brief interactions. Phone calls between Amber and her children became their lifeline, nightly conversations that Jones monitored closely. He permitted her to participate in youth programs at the Salvation Army on Sundays, presenting himself to the community as a devoted father, making the best of a difficult situation. But behind this carefully constructed image, pressure was building. The children became both his purpose and his prisoners, trapped in an increasingly volatile household, ruled by a man whose grip on reality was slowly unraveling. The discovery of Amber's affair with the 19-year-old neighbor in May 2012 marked a critical turning point. What might have led to self-reflection in another man instead fueled Jones' deepest insecurities. His childhood abandonment by his mother Cindy had left him with a festering wound that Amber's infidelity ripped wide open. "We became obsessed with control after that," a family acquaintance noted. "It wasn't just about punishing Amber, it was about making sure no one could ever betray him again." The divorce proceedings that followed revealed Jones' tactical intelligence. While Amber struggled without financial resources or legal guidance, Jones methodically built his case. He documented every parenting misstep, photographed any household disarray when Amber was responsible, and cultivated an image of himself as the stable, responsible parent. Court records show Jones repeatedly emphasized his education and intel salary against Amber's lack of employment. He brought character witnesses from their church who testified to his devotion as a father. The strategy worked perfectly. In October 2013, the court granted him primary custody of all 5 children, with Amber receiving only supervised visitation rights. Most disturbing was the court's decision to allow Jones himself to supervise these visits. This arrangement gave him unprecedented power over Amber's relationship with Mara, Elias, Natan, Gabriel, and Abigail. Their weekly meetings at the Lexington Chick-fil-A became exercises in psychological warfare, with Jones often canceling at the last minute or cutting visits short for perceived infractions. He would tell the children their mother didn't really want to see them, Amber later testified. He'd say, "I only showed up because the court made me." The nightly phone calls between Amber and her children, her one consistent connection, were conducted on speakerphone with Jones present. The children learned to self-censor, knowing their father was listening to every word. Inside the mobile home, Jones's control intensified. He implemented a strict regimen of physical exercise as punishment, forcing the children to do push-ups, squats, and wall sits until exhaustion. Neighbors occasionally heard him shouting biblical verses about discipline and obedience through open windows. The warning signs multiplied. At Saxagotha Elementary School, where the 3 oldest children attended, staff began noticing troubling patterns. School nurse Karen Leonhardt documented her concerns after Mara arrived with head lice. During their meeting, Jones casually mentioned using kerosene to kill the lice and their eggs, preferring a heat gun over a hairdryer, methods that alarmed Leonhardt enough to contact DSS. Teacher Amy Shear made another DSS report after observing bruises around Natan's neck, jawline, and arms. The boy had whispered to her that his father had held him against a wall in a chokehold. The report was filed, investigated, and ultimately dismissed. Another critical failure in the system designed to protect vulnerable children. Perhaps most telling were the observations of babysitter Joy Lorick, who described conditions in the Jones home that contradicted the image Timothy presented to the world. Behind the facade of the successful intel engineer was a house of neglect. Bugs crawling across unwashed dishes, clothes and trash scattered throughout, and hungry children. Some of them asked me not to tell their father I fed them, Lorick testified later, because he might not feed them again. After noticing a black eye on one child, Lorick filed her own complaint with DSS, the 3rd report that failed to trigger meaningful intervention. By summer 2014, Jones' behavior at work had become erratic enough that colleagues noticed. He took increasingly frequent sick days and appeared distracted during meetings. His supervisor documented several instances of Jones arriving late, disheveled, and smelling of alcohol. In late August, Jones abruptly withdrew the children from their scheduled activities. He stopped attending church, declined dinner invitations from neighbors, and began keeping the blinds drawn day and night. When a concerned church member knocked on his door, Jones refused to open it, shouting that they were dealing with family matters. On August 28, 2014, Jones picked up his 3 eldest children, Mara, Elias, and Natan, from Saxagotha Elementary School and his 2 youngest, Gabriel and Abigail, from daycare. Security footage showed him arguing with a teacher who expressed concern about Natan's visible exhaustion. Jones' response was chilling in retrospect. "I'll take care of it when we get home." No one realized these would be the last hours of the children's lives. August 28, 2014 began like any other late summer day in Lexington County. The morning air was heavy with humidity as Timothy Jones Jr. prepared his children for their day. School security footage captured him dropping off Mara, Elias, and Natan at Saxagotha Elementary at 7:45 a.m., then continuing to the daycare where Gabriel and Abigail spent their mornings. Teachers would later recall that Natan seemed particularly withdrawn that morning. His teacher noted in her log, N appears tired, refused breakfast, kept head down during morning activities. When she inquired, he simply shrugged and mumbled something about exercises the night before. Jones spent the day at Intel, where co-workers described him as distracted and irritable. He left work early, around 2:30 p.m., claiming a family emergency. Cell tower data tracked his movements as he drove first to the elementary school, arriving at 3:15 p.m. The school's dismissal camera captured a brief but tense interaction between Jones and Natan's teacher, who attempted to discuss the boy's concerning behavior. Jones cut the conversation short, ushering his 3 oldest children quickly to his car. By 3:45 p.m., Jones had collected Gabriel and Abigail from daycare. What happened next revealed the first public glimpse of his deteriorating mental state. Instead of driving home, Jones diverted to a Lexington County Walmart, where store security cameras recorded a disturbing scene. At 4:12 p.m., Jones parked in the far corner of the lot and forced all 5 children out of the car. Witnesses described him pacing back and forth, gesturing wildly and shouting at the confused children. One shopper was concerned enough to approach, but Jones quickly loaded the children back into the vehicle and sped away. This incident would later result in charges of unlawful neglect, charges that would become tragically irrelevant in light of what followed. At 6:30 p.m., neighbors reported seeing Jones' Cadillac Escalade parked at the mobile home, the children playing quietly in the yard while their father watched from the porch, phone in hand. One neighbor waved. Jones did not wave back. At 7:12 p.m., Amber Kaiser made her nightly call to speak with her children. She later testified that she spoke briefly with Mara and Elias before asking for Natan. Their conversation was short, but would become crucial evidence. "He sounded scared," Amber recalled. "He told me he broke the outlet and that Dad is really mad. I tried to calm him down, told him accidents happen. I asked to speak to Tim, but Natan said he was in the bathroom. That was the last time I heard my son's voice." When Amber called back at 8:30 p.m., no one answered. Her subsequent calls went straight to voicemail, an unprecedented break in their communication routine that immediately alarmed her. She would continue calling throughout the night, each unanswered ring increasing her dread. Inside the mobile home, the situation was rapidly deteriorating. According to Jones's later confession, he discovered Natan had broken an electrical outlet in his bedroom, a minor act of childhood clumsiness that triggered a disproportionate rage. Jones admitted to investigators that he forced Natan to perform strenuous exercises as punishment, push-ups, wall sits, and squats in the stifling heat of the poorly ventilated mobile home. He described making the 6-year-old exercise until he couldn't anymore, a punishment that continued for hours. "I was just trying to make him tough," Jones stated in his recorded confession. "My father was hard on me and I turned out fine. I didn't mean for it to go that far." But forensic evidence contradicted Jones' claim that he merely found Natan dead in his bed later that evening. The medical examiner would testify that the boy's injuries were consistent with strangulation, not exhaustion. Bruising patterns on his neck matched adult handprints, suggesting a direct, violent confrontation. What truly happened in those final moments between father and son remains known only to Jones, but evidence suggests Natan's death was no accident. The broken outlet became the catalyst for an explosion of violence that had been building for years. As night fell over the mobile home, Jones faced a horrifying reality of his own making. His son was dead, and 4 terrified children had witnessed their father's lethal rage. In Jones' distorted thinking, a terrible logic began to form. A logic that would lead to 4 more deaths before morning. According to prison guard Ben Boyd's later testimony, Jones confessed his son was just messing with the light socket and he grabbed him and he choked him. Then, fatefully, his daughter came in the room and witnessed what he had done. In that moment, as Mira stood in the doorway looking at her brother's lifeless body, Jones made a decision that transformed a tragedy into an incomprehensible horror. With Natan dead and a witness to his crime, Jones concluded there was only one way forward: a path that would lead him to eliminate all evidence, including his remaining children. With Natan dead, Jones faced a horrifying crossroads. According to his confession, he claimed to hear what he described as a demonic gremlin voice instructing him to eliminate all witnesses to his crime. Whether this was a genuine auditory hallucination or a convenient explanation created later, the outcome was the same: a methodical sequence of killings that demonstrated both calculation and cruelty. Mera, his eldest at 8 years old, was next. As she stood frozen in the doorway of Natan's room, Jones approached her from behind. Prison guard testimony revealed Jones admitted to strangling his daughter after she witnessed him killing her brother. The medical examiner noted defensive wounds on her arms, indicating she had fought for her life, the only child who had time to resist. Jones then moved through the mobile home with grim purpose. 7-year-old Elias was sleeping when his father entered his room. Jones later described using his hands to strangle the boy, who woke during the attack but was overpowered before he could cry out. For the youngest children, 2-year-old Gabrielle and 1-year-old Abigail, Jones employed a different method. "Their necks were too small for my hands," he stated matter-of-factly in his confession. Instead, he used a belt, looping it around each small throat until they stopped breathing. The medical examiner would later confirm this detail, noting the distinctive ligature marks that differed from the handprint bruising on the older children. By midnight, all 5 children lay dead in their beds. Jones described sitting in the hallway for hours, surrounded by the aftermath of his actions. He drank heavily, consuming nearly a full bottle of vodka while contemplating his next steps. As dawn approached on August 29, Jones began the process of concealment. He wrapped each child individually in plastic garbage bags, using duct tape to secure them. The bodies were initially placed in the trunk of his Cadillac Escalade without any additional covering, a detail that would become significant as decomposition began in the summer heat. Jones then embarked on what investigators would later call his disposal journey, a meandering 9-day drive across 5 states. Cell phone records and highway cameras tracked his seemingly aimless route through South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi. On the 3rd day, August 31, the smell in the vehicle had become overwhelming. Jones purchased bleach, muriatic acid, and more garbage bags at a hardware store in Georgia. In a secluded wooded area, he stopped to rewrap the bodies, dousing them with chemicals in a crude attempt to mask the odor and accelerate decomposition. During his confession, Jones mentioned having written plans to dismember, boil, or burn the bodies, but claimed he couldn't bring himself to do it. Investigators later found these notes in his vehicle, detailed step-by-step instructions that contradicted his portrayal of remorseful hesitation. As he drove, Jones made cash withdrawals from multiple ATMs, discarded the children's belongings at various dumpsters, and used his electronics expertise to disable the GPS tracking in his phone. These actions suggested not a man in the grip of psychosis, but one methodically covering his tracks. On September 6, 9 days after the murders, Jones reached a breaking point in Smith County, Mississippi. There, at a rural crossroads near his native town, he pulled onto a dirt logging road and carried the 5 small bundles into the woods. Using only his hands, he dug shallow graves and buried his children side by side. The absence of 5 children went unnoticed for days. Amber Kaiser, accustomed to Jones controlling access to her children, initially assumed his silence was another power play. After 3 days of unanswered calls, her concern escalated to alarm. On September 1, 2014, she contacted the Lexington County Sheriff's Department to report her inability to reach her children. Deputies conducted a welfare check at Jones's mobile home, finding it empty with no signs of the family. Jones had not reported to work at Intel for days, and neighbors hadn't seen the children playing outside, their usual routine. The school confirmed the children's unexplained absence, but with the Labor Day weekend approaching, authorities classified it as a custody dispute rather than a missing persons case. We had no evidence of foul play, acting Lexington County Sheriff Lewis McCarty later explained. Just a father who may have taken his kids on an unannounced trip. This changed dramatically on September 6, when Officer Chad Barfield manned a routine DUI checkpoint in Smith County, Mississippi. At approximately 9:15 p.m., a black Cadillac Escalade approached. The driver, Timothy Jones Jr., appeared nervous, his speech slurred and movements jerky. I noticed the smell immediately, Barfield testified. In 15 years of law enforcement, I've encountered decomposition before. This was unmistakable. A search of Jones' vehicle revealed a disturbing collection: bleach, acid, blood-stained children's clothing, and a bucket of chemicals containing what appeared to be human tissue. Most telling was Jones' handwritten note: "The kids are in heaven. I'm headed to hell." When questioned about his children's whereabouts, Jones first claimed they were with his ex-wife, then with his mother in Mississippi. As his stories unraveled, authorities contacted Lexington County, transforming a welfare check into a multi-state investigation. Faced with mounting evidence, Jones broke down. In a recorded confession spanning 4 hours, he detailed the murders with unsettling clarity. He wasn't coerced, he stated, except for investigators' promise of a good burial for my children. "I'll tell you everything," Jones said on the recording. "They deserve to be found." The following morning, Jones led investigators through dense woods in rural Alabama. Walking with his head down, he navigated unerringly to a small clearing where 5 shallow graves lay side by side, marked only by displaced earth and scattered leaves. The recovery operation was methodical and somber. FBI forensic teams documented the scene extensively before carefully exhuming each child. Mira, Elias, Natan, Gabriel, and Abigail were removed one by one, still wrapped in the garbage bags their father had sealed. The hardest part wasn't finding them, one investigator later shared. It was watching their father stand there, seemingly detached, as we uncovered what he'd done. The children's remains were transported to the medical examiner's office in Columbia, South Carolina, where autopsies confirmed the manner of death for each child matched Jones' confession. According to Sheriff McCarty, the bodies were badly decomposed and the cause of death wasn't immediately apparent, though it was later ruled homicide in each case.
The bodies of 5 children, ages 1 to 8, were found in Alabama this afternoon.
The children's father led investigators to their bodies. The crime scene is in Wilcox County off Highway 10 near Camden. Fox 10 News reporter Candace Murphy has been there gathering details about this shocking crime. Candace.
It really is shocking, Bob and Lenise, and a devastating story at that. Investigators actually just wrapped up. They've been on scene since about 3 o'clock today. We're told they used helicopters. It was state investigators, federal investigators, investigators from South Carolina, where the father eventually led investigators to the crime scene that's behind me across the street. That's where deputies say they found 5 children wrapped in plastic bags. Now, in garbage bags. Police say the children's father, Timothy Jones, is suspected of killing his 5 children in South Carolina, where they lived, and dumping the children's bodies here in Wilcox County. Now, Jones was arrested at a DUI checkpoint Saturday in Raleigh, Mississippi. His children were not with him at that time. Police believe he was drinking and found evidence of a meth lab and spy synthetic poison in his Cadillac Escalade. Police also say they found bleach, blood, and possibly body fluids in his car. He is charged with child neglect and other charges are pending. We're told he's being held in Mississippi and will be extradited to South Carolina today. Investigators told us more about processing this crime scene.
You've got basically processing of the crime scene, collection of evidence. There's going to be a very methodical, detailed processing to ensure that the case is as solid as possible. And like I said, law enforcement from South Carolina, Mississippi Bureau of Investigation, they're here, as well as the FBI.
Now, the children's bodies will be autopsied to figure out the cause of death. The Lexington County Sheriff's Department will hold a news conference.
As news of the discovery broke, the Lexington community gathered for a candlelight vigil outside Saxe-Gotha Elementary School. 5 empty chairs sat on the stage, each bearing a photo and the name of a child whose absence would forever haunt the school hallways.
I would like to send my deepest sympathy to the children's mother and family. I never had the chance to meet her, but I feel blessed to have spent the little bit of time with the children that we did.
For a period of time, Christina babysat the 5 children ages 1 to 8, who investigators say were murdered by their father, Timothy Jones Jr. in Lexington County. After a massive manhunt last week, their bodies were recovered in the woods near Camden, Alabama. During the vigil, pictures of the 5 smiling children glow in the candlelight.
Beautiful service, beautiful.
Others here don't know the Jones family at all, but say they're neighbors since this community is so small and tight-knit.
And it's just been a complete shock. It's not something I can get out of my mind.
Jenny Havard says she's been having trouble praying. Others say this tragedy feels like a 9/11 for the small Lexington County community of Red Bank. Which is why they say this vigil and prayer service is so important.
Maybe this is going to help us all to be able to deal with it.
Jones was extradited to South Carolina and charged with 5 counts of murder. As he was led into the courthouse for his first appearance, a reporter asked if he had anything to say. His response was barely audible. "I'm sorry." Timothy Jones Jr.'s trial began in May 2019. Nearly 5 years after the murders. The Lexington County Courthouse overflowed with media, curious onlookers, and family members from both sides. Jones, now thinner and grayer, sat impassively as his defense team outlined their strategy, not guilty by reason of insanity. "This is not a whodunit," defense attorney Boyd Young told jurors in his opening statement. "This is a why did he do it?" The defense painted Jones as a man whose mind had fractured under the weight of undiagnosed mental illness, exacerbated by drug use and the stress of single parenthood. They introduced evidence of schizophrenia in Jones' maternal family line and pointed to his increasingly erratic behavior in the months before the killings. Most compelling was the testimony about Jones's claim that he heard a demonic gremlin voice instructing him to kill his children. The defense argued this hallucination proved Jones couldn't distinguish right from wrong during the murders, the legal threshold for insanity in South Carolina. However, the prosecution's expert witness, psychiatrist Richard Frierson, systematically dismantled this narrative. After extensive evaluation, Frierson testified that Jones did not have schizophrenia, but rather a substance-induced psychotic disorder. The distinction was crucial. Temporary psychosis triggered by Jones's abuse of synthetic marijuana and alcohol didn't meet the legal standard for insanity. He understood the moral and legal wrongfulness of his actions, Frierson testified. His attempts to conceal the bodies, his elaborate lies to authorities, and his written plans all demonstrate awareness that what he was doing was wrong. Frierson cited Jones' behavior on the night of the murders as particularly revealing. Before killing his children, Jones had watched a graphic rape scene from the movie American History X and listened to the song Butterfly Kisses, a father-daughter ballad that seemed to indicate his awareness of the parent-child bond he was about to sever. The jury also heard from Jones' own psychiatrist, who argued that Jones was genuinely insane and incapable of reasoning during the killings. This created a battle of experts that ultimately came down to which side the jury found more credible. Amber Kaiser's testimony proved devastating to the defense. Taking the stand on the trial's 9th day, she broke down repeatedly while describing her children and their relationship with their father. "Tim was always a good father while we were married," she acknowledged, before adding, "but there were more bad times than good down here." She described Jones' mood swings and quick temper. "You really didn't have to do anything to get him angry. Tim was just angry." When asked directly about Jones' mental state, Amber was unequivocal. He was not insane, he was just angry. She described him as over-angry rather than mentally ill, a distinction that resonated with jurors. Perhaps most damaging to Jones's defense was the playing of his 4-hour confession. Throughout the recording, Jones provided coherent, detailed accounts of each killing, his disposal methods, and his subsequent journey. He sobbed as the tape played, but showed no other reaction as jurors heard his own voice describe strangling his children. The prosecution methodically presented physical evidence, the children's clothing, Jones's handwritten notes about disposal methods, receipts for bleach and acid, and forensic evidence from the vehicle and burial site. They showed jurors the belt used to strangle the youngest children and photographs of the shallow graves. On the 12th day, the prosecution rested after presenting testimony from 31 witnesses. The defense called 28 of their own, including family members who described Jones' troubled childhood and mental health experts who supported the insanity claim. As deliberations began, the central question wasn't whether Jones killed his children. He had admitted to that, but whether he was legally responsible for his actions. After just 6 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their answer: guilty on all 5 counts of murder. Jones showed no visible reaction as the verdict was read. Behind him, Amber Kaiser wept silently, her 5-year quest for justice finally complete. On June 4, 2019, after 6 hours of deliberation, the jury rejected Timothy Jones Jr.'s insanity defense and found him guilty on all 5 counts of murder. The courtroom fell silent as the verdict was read, broken only by muffled sobs from family members. Jones himself remained stoic, his gaze fixed on the middle distance. The trial then entered its penalty phase, where the same jury would determine whether Jones would face life imprisonment or death. This phase essentially became a second trial, with both sides presenting evidence about Jones' character, background, and the heinousness of his crimes.
A Lexington County jury finding Timothy Ray Jones guilty of murdering his 5 children back in 2014 today. Our Jacob Reynolds was in court from the very beginning of jury selection through the verdict this afternoon. He joins me on set tonight to talk about this case. No emotion from Timothy Ray Jones today. I know we've talked about this in some earlier broadcasts today, but it's important to point out because throughout the duration of this trial, there have been many times when he broke down. He was sobbing uncontrollably, at least it seemed. And then today, when the verdict comes down, guilty of 5 counts of murder, stoic. There was nothing coming from him.
Well, and that was the interesting thing, is I was sitting a few rows behind him to kind of get the best view of the jury that I could, and I never saw his hand go up to his face or anything like he had been doing so many times. And it was just, you know, it was kind of strange. He just sat there, a blank face almost. And like you had said, especially when they played the tape of his confession with investigators, you know, kind of some other moments in trial, repeatedly getting upset, taking the glasses off, dabbing his eyes quite a bit. When his father testified, especially Timothy Jones Sr., he was doing that a lot. So there had been a lot of talk about the times he would show emotion. And then today, 5 guilty verdicts for the murder of his 5 children, and no expression.
Prosecutors emphasized the vulnerability of the victims and the calculated nature of the killings. They displayed photographs of each child in happier times alongside the medical examiner's diagrams showing how they died. These 5 children trusted their father, Prosecutor Rick Hubbard told jurors. He was supposed to protect them. Instead, he delivered them to their deaths one by one with his own hands. The defense team urged mercy, presenting testimony about Jones' traumatic childhood, his previously clean criminal record as an adult, and his accomplishments as a computer engineer. They argued that executing Jones would only compound the tragedy. Another death won't bring these children back, defense attorney Boyd Young pleaded. It won't heal the wounds, it will only create more grief. On June 13, 2019, after deliberating for less than 2 hours, the jury unanimously recommended the death penalty. 3 days later, Judge Eugene Griffith formally sentenced Jones to death for each of the 5 murders. Given the opportunity to speak before sentencing, Jones addressed the court briefly. "I know what I did was selfish and cowardly. I'm sorry, I wish I could take it back." As of 2022, Jones remains on death row in South Carolina, his case automatically entering the appeals process that typically takes years to complete. The South Carolina Supreme Court denied his initial appeal, moving him one step closer to execution. The case continues to resonate with the public, raising difficult questions about mental illness, parental rights, and the ultimate punishment. What do you think about the death penalty in cases like this? Let us know where you're watching from. Does the punishment fit the crime, or is there a better way to serve justice in such devastating cases? The tragedy of Mira, Elias, Natan, Gabrielle, and Abigail Jones forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about our systems of protection and intervention. Their story reveals a series of missed opportunities, moments when different decisions might have altered their fate. 3 separate reports to the Department of Social Services, teachers who noticed bruises, a babysitter who witnessed hunger and neglect, a school nurse concerned about dangerous home remedies. Each represented a moment when the trajectory toward tragedy might have been interrupted, yet the children remained in danger. Mental health struggles, when untreated, can escalate in unpredictable ways. Timothy Jones Jr.'s deterioration didn't happen overnight. It progressed through visible stages that, in retrospect, appear as clear warning signals. His increasing isolation of the children, rigid control, and erratic behavior formed a pattern that became recognizable only after it was too late. Today, the 5 Jones children are remembered not just for how they died, but for who they were. Classmates recall Mira's artistic talent and how she looked after her siblings. Teachers remember Elias' infectious laugh and Natan's curiosity. The community honors their memory through a scholarship fund that helps children from troubled homes. Perhaps the most meaningful legacy these children leave is a renewed commitment to protecting the vulnerable. Their case prompted South Carolina to review and strengthen its child welfare protocols, potentially saving countless other children from similar fates. If this story moved you, please consider subscribing to Shadows of Crime for more in-depth, true crime documentaries that explore the human factors behind these tragic events. Understanding these cases may be our best hope for preventing future tragedies.